yeah? All he basically did was try to reinforce that, yeah? And put a theological perspective towards that as well, okay? So what happened was, by 1933, within 2 years, by 1933, 1934, W. Faraj Muhammad had left. No one knew what happened to him, whether he was assassinated, whether he was an agent which was actually sent there in order to sweep up, you know, an activist movement, etc. Nobody knows, but he had actually disappeared, okay? Then what started taking place then, that Elijah Poole, or Robert Poole, who becomes Elijah Poole now, who later becomes Elijah Muhammad, he basically turns around and says that he is now the messenger of Allah, and that Faraj Muhammad, yeah, was Allah himself who came down as a man, okay? And that the white man was a devil. This was the philosophy. Now, what started happening at this particular time now, we started to see a lot of Muslim immigrants, especially from Syria and Palestine and these places, coming into many of these inner city areas. But they weren't really giving dawah, as to speak. Okay, there were many opened up, you know, corner stores, grocery stores, etc., and just trying to survive in America. Yeah, the knowledge of Islam was not as high as it probably is now by many immigrant groups that go to America. Okay, but this was reality at that particular time, and so the 1930s. So what you started to see was that the Nation of Islam, that Elijah Muhammad was able to do something that no one was able to do. He was able to take the most black women out of prostitution, and black men from out of drugs and out of the prison system in such a short space of time, clean them up, make them reliable people. They started to get married to women in their community. They started to have children. They started to support their children. But they started to open up their own businesses, not relying on the hegemonic or the dominant cultural society to fund them. This is the secret behind the Nation of Islam and its growth at this particular time. No, so there you see the Nation of Islam coming in on the 1930s at the end of the Depression. Okay, so 1940s, 1950s. In 1950s, this is when we start to see approximately Malcolm X starting to appear on the arena, start to appear on the scene. His brother writes to him in prison and tells him that he should join this movement. He should believe in just one God or just one Allah. Okay? But Malcolm was not so much an atheist, but he felt that religion couldn't do much for him because no matter how much you pray, you're still, you know, getting hell from the dominant culture. This was his way of understanding things in that time. But when he actually was so what happened was, when he actually read the letter by his brother and by his sister, and he decided to write to Elijah Muhammad, he started to notice something, that he couldn't construct sentences. He could not construct sentences clearly at all. And he tried again, and he tried again. So one of the things that Malcolm decided to do while he was in prison was to learn basic skills, literacy skills, just reading and writing. Because he wanted to make sure that the way he spoke came out the way it should in print. Okay? So he went back to the drawing board in order to do this. And that's how we started, and he slowly started to embrace some of the elements and the principles of the Nation of Islam at this particular time. Okay? These are like I said, these are some of the books that he read when he was in prison. While he was in prison, he read over 250 biographies and autobiographies of different people. He read the works of Shakespeare. He read things on the Roman Empire. He read everything he can get his hands on. This is the sort of person that he was. And he read so much that he said later on that this is what caused him to go slightly blind. Because the reason was because they would switch the lights off at a certain time, and there would be a low light in the hallway, and you'd stay up late nights reading. Sometimes Malcolm, while he was in prison, would only have maybe 2 to 3 hours sleep, if he was lucky. This is how he was engrossed in his education, and he wanted to bring about major changes. He started to understand the plight of his people now. He started to read history, he started to look at the American Civil War, the Revolutionary War, and the place of his people in this. And what was he going to do when he got out, and how he was going to change this. This is the sort of person that he was. This is the sort of things he was reflected on in order to bring about those changes. He was part of the debating team, and what started his popularity was that a lot of people started to come to listen to him at his debating team while he was in prison. So it was clear he was a good orator, he was a good presenter, while he was in the prison system itself. Okay? So let's have a look at Malcolm X as a family man. He was a devout and a faithful husband. One of the things that his wife had said, that when she was married to Malcolm, one thing she can guarantee, she would never know him or see him with another woman. If he was ever speaking with another woman, he'd always make sure there was another male with him. He was very, very aware of the American system, of espionage, of entrapment. He was very much aware of this, and he made sure he safeguarded himself in whatever situation he found himself in. Okay? Malcolm believed in the education of all women. And this was clear when he went to places like Syria and Egypt as well. One of the things that he noticed when he went to places like Syria and Egypt, he even said that when he came back, he said, the Muslim countries that I went to, yeah, that they're either as educated as their women or as backward as their women. By this I mean, in the areas, whether it was in Syria or Egypt, where the women are educated, he said the whole area is educated, including the children. But in the areas that I went to where the women were not educated, he said the whole society was as backwards as their women were. This is one of the first things that he observed when he started to go to Muslim countries and look at education himself. So Malcolm was aware of this. Malcolm was aware that the education of women is up because his sisters were educated, and his mother was a well-educated woman as well. So he was not against the education of women. Okay? Malcolm never discussed work at all. There were certain ethics about this individual. If you read the introduction to this book, one of the things that you will find is that the author used to get shouted at a lot with Malcolm because Malcolm never respected the person who never had a watch. And Alex Haley was one of those people who didn't have a watch. Okay? He always did things on time. And Malcolm was the sort of person which would turn up maybe 20 minutes, half hour before the meeting. This is the sort of person that he was. Okay? Okay, I've talked about that. He always wore a watch. Yeah, and as his father, even though he was a busy man, one of the things that he'd always want to do when he went home as well, that he would expect his kids to stay up ready for him, and he would tell them a story, etc., hug them, kiss them before he went to bed, because he had a very busy schedule. But his wife said that he was a very good father. When he was there, he was a very, very good father. Very good father. And he encouraged that education, even her education as well. Okay? He never ate between meals. Okay? Malcolm used to fast every other day. Every other day. This is something that he used to do. This is something he did even before he went on Hajj. Okay, this is something he used to do before he went on Hajj. Even when he was asked by people, why is it that you don't eat between meals? Because, he said, because I don't want to upset Betty, my wife. Because she cooks for me, she expects me to eat the food. So why would I want to upset my wife? So I'd rather go without and just have a coffee. So these are the sort of methods, these are sort of principles that this individual had. He didn't like controversy within his own life, even though he was running into controversial issues. Okay? He was able to compartmentalize what he was doing to what he was doing as Malcolm the father, Malcolm the husband. Malcolm the activist was a different person altogether. Okay? And this is something I want us to acknowledge and try to understand about him. Okay. Right. So, in Harlem, we have a lot of soapboxes. A lot of people are holding their own corner or standing up doing their little speeches. You've got the communists doing whatever they're doing. Okay? Women's movement doing whatever they're doing. The socialists, the Marxists, all these different people, black nationalists, Pan-Africanists, Pan-nationalists, All different people in Harlem are doing whatever they're doing. By the time in the 1950s, when Malcolm himself comes out of prison, he formally embraces the Nation of Islam. And then he goes out in order to do what he needs to do. Then they started to see what this man was able to achieve. He was able to pull crowds to such an extent that some of those people who were speaking for many years on certain soapboxes started to lose crowds, all because of what Malcolm himself was saying. His content was powerful. His content was realistic. Malcolm was able to make the most pervasive thing real. Okay? He was able to bring the reality of the African Americans alive. This is why many of the black study programs that we have in the universities, within the schools, one of the things which they want to push more so is looking at Martin Luther King and trying to forget about Malcolm X. But they should be together, okay? You know, but we shouldn't see one more than the other. The only thing with Malcolm X is that Malcolm X made the dominant culture a little bit uncomfortable about the oppression, especially the liberals at this particular thing, because liberals didn't have as much power, and they still don't have as much power than maybe the conservatives. And the reason is because they're not in the seat or the position of power to make those reforms and to make those changes and adjustments in society, whether it's social adjustments, political, whatever the case may be. So this is the reality of this particular situation. So this is something about Malcolm's speech. He was eloquent, simplistic, articulate, knew how to speak. Came out of prison. According to some scholars, they reckon that his knowledge was equivalent to 4 PhDs. In 8 years, he acquired the knowledge of 4 PhDs, okay? Which is totally amazing at that particular time. He had studied every cultural group that you can think of. Because in order to understand a people, you must first look at their culture. That way you can understand their psychology. Malcolm knew this at an early stage. Because in order to go to these countries, he'd have to know something about them. So he was not an ignorant person at all or whatsoever. These are important characteristics and features that not only Malcolm had, that many of us have, and many of us who don't have it, is something that we should try to attain sooner or later in our lives. Okay, we talked about that. We spoke on all issues, civil rights, right. Now, in the 1950s, we started to see major changes taking place within the American landscape. Now, the civil rights movement was winning more and more momentums. In the 1950s, we started to see desegregation of buses. We started to see desegregations taking place within the schooling system. We started to see where blacks and whites were allocated particular areas like drinking fountains and toilets, etc. All of those things slowly started to come down as a result of the civil rights movement. But one of the things that Malcolm was very uncomfortable about with a lot of the black leaders at this time was that they were not internationalizing the struggle of what was taking place of black people in the diaspora. This is one of the things. And the lack of acknowledging that black people were not considered human beings. This is why you had a dichotomy of civil rights and human rights. Because what Malcolm was talking about, we need to stop talking about civil rights, we need to talk about human rights. The right to be a human. Because like I said, and most of you know about social Darwinism, etc., these things permeated for decades within the structures, the American structures, the British structures, or the colonial structures, okay? These things permeated for such a long time, yeah? Where they started to see certain people of African descent as being less than animals. So Malcolm believed at this particular time, yeah, there's no point fighting for civil rights if they don't see you as a human being. Because even if you are integrated into their society, they're not going to see you as their equal. And this was very much a true case, especially when you look at the abolition movement, for instance. As soon as they abolished slavery and they wanted to abolish it as a system, when they abolished the slave trade, and then they wanted to abolish slavery, yeah, it was not the same group of people. It was not the same group of people at all. What I'm trying to emphasize here is that certain people who were liberals at this time would only go so far, where they would still, even though they wanted to see them come out of this so-called oppression, they still saw them better than themselves. This was a reality of that particular situation. So civil rights and human rights. And then there was integration. The civil rights were talking about elements of integration. He was talking about segregation. Why he was talking about segregation? This was the philosophy that was coming out of the Nation of Islam. The reason why he was talking about segregation was because he was saying, why do you want to integrate with people who don't want you? It's illogical. If someone doesn't want you and like you, why are you forcing yourself on those people? Just be independent. And this was the philosophy that came out of the Marcus Garvey movement of the 1920s. Be self-reliant. Yeah? You don't have to, depend on yourselves on your own. This is what it was about. And this is what he was trying to push. Okay? And then when he started to push these different things, this is when he started to be seen more and more on television. People did not want to hear Elijah Muhammad speak no more. They wanted to hear more of Malcolm speak now, because he was eloquent. Okay? He was able to articulate himself. He was able to speak for the downtrodden individual about the oppression of his being. This is what Malcolm was able to do at this particular point, or this particular juncture. So what he was basically saying, that integration is not a way forward. Get your own, and then if they want to integrate, because you've got the same sort of wealth, etc. as them, then you can integrate if you want, but don't just segregate. So segregation was not a way of creating an individual state to attack and destroy the dominant culture. Because this is what the white conservatives in America were trying to say, that they want a separate state in order to destroy us. They said, no, this couldn't be too far from the truth. We just want a state of our own. Because you don't want us, just give us a state of our own. You've got over 50 states, just give us one. This was his argument. This is what he was trying to say. Okay? And then he gave us the analogy of the house Negro and the field Negro. Now, when he came up with this analogy in the 1950s on national television, within American psyche, where they were black, white, yellow, red, or brown, they were able to understand the mechanism, the dynamic of these two individuals. The house Negro was a person who loved his oppressor, who liked his oppressor, who would fight hard to keep the oppressor alive, to keep the oppressor system in existence, to oppress him or to oppress her.